Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Play Action Podcast. It's Dave Farrell alongside Matt Brown and Joe Fortenbaugh. And guys, going to sportsbookreview.com, which is where we go every single week. You see all of the lines, you see all of the different sports books, and you see the ratings too. Now, Joe, we talk about the importance of shopping for lines all of the time. You know, when there's a game that you really like, that hook, that half point can really make a difference in a lot of places. And when you go to sportsbookreview.com, you're going to see all the different books. You're going to see how they're rated, and you're also going to see different lines out there, right?
Understand your key numbers, 3, 7, to a lesser extent 4. You want to be on the right side of those equations. If you like the favorite in a game that's -7, Sportsbook Review is going to help you identify where, if any, 6.5s exist. Conversely, if you like the underdog in a situation like that, you're going to want to look for 7.5. It's not just half a point. In all instances, Matt, that is a full additional possession that a team's going to need in order to cover that spread.
No, absolutely. We've talked about this in the first few weeks of this podcast about how important it is to have a couple to even 3 or 4 different accounts at some of these books out there, because we've seen lines vary drastically. I mean, seriously, you can even look right now. I mean, there are a whole point to even 1.5 differences out there in a Cleveland-Houston game and a couple of these other games that we're going to talk about. So you're talking about a whole 1.5. And if you like one side or the other, then you just shop a little bit and get that best number, and it can really, really turn a loser into a winner.
Yeah, and then right there on the front page, you're going to see how well the books are rated. You're going to see which ones are A to A+, how long they've been around. So you're getting assured that you are getting the absolute best prices at the absolute best books. Sportsbookreview.com. Gentlemen, let's dive right into it here. Green Bay and Minnesota. Of course, Minnesota is going to be on a short week here. This is really a game that will, I think, determine who's going to have control of the NFC North. Minnesota is coming off of a very close victory over the Chicago Bears. And look, going into that game, some people thought Minnesota's not going to do well going up against the Chicago Bears at home. And in the first half of the game, they didn't do well. Good thing for them. The Chicago Bears also didn't do well. This one's a pretty close one. Green Bay laying 3 points, but they're traveling to Minnesota for this one. Joe, how do you see this game going?
The Vikings have been a better team at home this season than on the road, and that's nothing surprising. The question here is going to be who's under center for the Vikings. Is it going to be Case Keenum or Sam Bradford? Mike Zimmer, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, made an awful decision in the Monday night game against Chicago. Bradford was in that game far too long and couldn't step into his throws. If you watch the left foot, he was unwilling to step all the way through his throws. Zimmer waited too long, but fortunately for him, Keenum was able to bail him out later when they did make the switch. It's got to be Keenum moving forward until Bradford gets fully healthy. That's the biggest concern for Minnesota. On the flip side, you've got a Green Bay team that looked very, very good at Dallas last week. But now, Matt, they're on the road for the second week in a row. Eventually, that can catch up with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. But I am of the thought here that as long as this team is with Case Keenum at quarterback, I really like Green Bay in this spot. And you were spot on there, Joe. I mean, listen, they nearly gave that game away. I mean, they spotted a whole half of offense, basically. They just were like, hey, okay, we're fine. We will not score for an entire half because they were going to leave Sam Bradford in that game come hell or high water. You and I were texting back and forth, couldn't believe what we were watching with our own eyes. Feel very fortunate to get out of that game with a push, actually, the way that everything played out. But yes, listen, looking at this Minnesota team, without Dalvin Cook, it was definitely a different team. Now, Jerick McKinnon certainly stepped up, but I don't think we can expect this guy to be able to run over people at his little frame for much of the season. I mean, listen, I love to see that effort out of the little guy, lowering his head, plowing into these guys, but that's going to take the toll. They're going to have to rely on Latavius Murray, whether they like it or not, Joe. And you know very well, Latavius Murray is just not an A-caliber running back in the NFL right now. I think Green Bay here at only 3, at only a field goal, is a pretty strong bet.
I'm considering the under 46 as well. I think the Packers struggle to go up and down the field with the consistency that we're used to seeing. And conversely, I think Minnesota is going to want to at least try to establish a rushing attack, even though it's going to be futile. Latavius Murray, here's his rundown. 2 yards, 1 yard, 3 yards, 52 yards, 2 yards, 1 yard. And everyone goes, hey, Murray's got a great average. He looks fantastic. No, it's one play, and those are few and far between.
And what we saw, Joe, is as long as you stay away from throwing at Xavier Rhodes, I mean, which is what the Bears did. They never threw his way, and they were able to move the ball down the field. So if you just throw the other side, and guess what Green Bay has? A wealth of receivers. They have tons of them. They are going to be able to move the ball in this game.
Well, you mentioned 46.5 being the total. That's the total in this next game as well. The Browns traveling to take on the Houston Texans. And it started at 44. It's crept up since. You can even find it at 47 in some places, 47.5 I'm seeing over on heritagesportsbookreview.com. And, of course, this one, no big surprise. Houston is laying big points. 10.5 is what it opened at. 11 in some places. It's come down to 9.5 in other places. So you're seeing a pretty big differential there of 1.5 depending on where you look. Matt, take us away.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a great bet at 44, right? And then that total is now an entire field goal to a field goal and a hook more. And I really loved it at 44. I think this definitely has a chance to go over here. You see how Houston's offense has been able to move. Deshaun Watson's been able to, and honestly, I think Will Fuller coming back has actually helped that offense a ton as well, giving them just one more threat there. Looks like Lamar Miller knew that his job was in jeopardy, and he's been playing very well over the last few weeks as well for Houston. And let's be for real. Cleveland's a better team with Hogan under center. They're going to start Hogan this week, and he is a better quarterback than Kaiser is right now. So I expect them to actually be able to put up a few points as well. However, I'm not willing to go at 47.5. I actually think that's more the right number there, Joe. So I feel very unfortunate. I don't like Houston at double digits here. This is not some place that I'm going to go with that. I really like the over at 44, but at 47.5, that just seems kind of right on to me.
There are some monster spreads out there this week. Monster spreads. We've had so many weeks where there have been these tight lines, and now all of a sudden it's 10s and 11s. On one side of the equation with Houston, you're down some key defenders, notably J.J. Watt, who fractured the tibia plateau in his leg on Sunday Night Football against Kansas City. He's done for the season. So what's the impact going to be there? How much can Cleveland take advantage of it? This is a Browns team that's 1-5-1 against the spread. 0-5-1 against the spread in their last 6 road games. They don't cover at home. They barely cover on the road, and they can't move the ball with any sort of consistency. Matt, I agree with you that Kevin Hogan is a step up for the offense, but how big of a step? Are they going to put 21 on the board? Because if you like the over in this game, how many points do you think of those 44 to 46 do you believe you're going to be getting from Cleveland?
Well, let's put it this way, and I'm glad that you brought up the defense thing there. Witten Merciless, and then also we saw what happened to Clowney whenever Watt was out last year. He was not as good because he was the guy that they
double team him. They'll triple team him in some certain circumstances. Yeah, it's tough for him.
Exactly. So it changes the whole dynamic of that defense, which actually wasn't playing just lights out anyway, to be perfectly honest. But I mean, it certainly changes the dynamic of this defense. I honestly believe Cleveland could be I think Cleveland could be good for 20 points in this game, 17 to 20 points. I think that's a very realistic outcome. So, Joe, I mean, 27 to 20, and that puts it right on the number for me. So I don't know. I don't feel very confident one way or the other in this one.
All right, next up is Detroit at New Orleans, and this one, maybe some people would expect that New Orleans would come in as basically a pick'em or even an underdog going up against Detroit. Not the case. They opened laying 3, New Orleans did, and now they're laying 6 in some places, 4.5 in others. Total is 49.5 is what it's been bet down to. Opened at 51. You can still find it at 50 or 51 in some places on sportsreview.com.
Everybody loves them running Adrian Peterson out of town. They're like, all right, Adrian Peterson's gone.
Out of here.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson's out of town.
Sports back up. Yeah,
let's just start betting this team like crazy now.
So, Joe, is it crazy that New Orleans is coming in laying 6 points against Detroit, or do you think that's accurate?
You dive into it, and this one gets really interesting for 2 reasons. This Saints team looked dead to rights coming off that New England game, and I believe week 2 when the Patriots just rolled in and kicked them in the teeth. And then something very funny happened. The Saints just kind of quietly went about their business, got organized, went into Carolina and beat up on what now appears to be a very good Panthers team, and then went to London and smashed the Dolphins. And there are 2 things to keep in mind here as it pertains to the Saints coming off that London game. 1, they've had an extra week to get ready, and 2, teams coming off the London game with an extra week to get ready are covering the spread somewhere around 75 to 80%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but very quietly, teams with a bye week off the London game historically have been very good. This is a really big line, and that's what points me to New Orleans. Generally, I would think maybe 3 and a hook because Detroit's been competitive, and I don't think there's a whole lot of recency bias coming off that Carolina loss last weekend. But Matt, you're going to hang 5 or 6 out there. 3 weeks ago, this Saints team was dead to rights. Now all of a sudden it's 5 or 6. It's either overinflation or it's the books telling you something, and that's that they want you taking Detroit because they like the Saints.
So, Joe, if you would have bet favorites coming off of a bye just over about the last 10 years, you would be looking at a 13% ROI. And it is a favorite coming off of a bye just seems to cover because they have that week to get healthy. They have that week to kind of figure out what was going right. Let's do more of that. What was going wrong? Let's do less of that. And then also for this Saints team, another thing that's going to fly a little bit under the radar, they get Willie Snead back healthy again this week. And Willie Snead is a guy that gives Drew Brees that underneath slot presence, and he's going to be a guy that they are going to go to early and often in this game, and it might open up the opportunity for some deep balls to Thomas and to Ginn in this game. I like the Saints here a lot, Joe. I liked them a whole lot better at 4.5 where it opened. I think 6 is still very reasonable, but I think you're going to need to get on that. I think people are kind of down on this Detroit team, and if you like the Saints side, I could see this even getting to 6.5. So I think you need to pounce if you like the Saints side of this game.
Well, talking about teams that are coming off a bye, Atlanta is one of those teams as well. They're going up against what can only be classified as the miserable Miami Dolphins at this point, and Atlanta opens.
Dave, let me interrupt you. How miserable can you be when you're doing cocaine in the office place?
You know what? Maybe.
Hey, he was doing that video out of love. Okay, he was doing that video out of love.
God, that was
tell
so
in his
bizarre.
voice. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, new news on that with the girlfriend who's just doubled down. Now she's doing the media rounds. Google that. It's a delight. But yeah, so Miami dealing with another distraction now with their offensive line coach resigning after doing blow in the office. Atlanta opens laying 9. Now they're laying 11.5, 12.5 in some places. 48 is the total here. Matt, you start.
So, Joe, I think another thing that could kind of go under the radar here that people won't talk about, but Vic Beasley might be back in this game as well. And Vic Beasley is last year's sack leader, and I think that is a big, big difference for this Atlanta defense. And let's be for real, this Miami team has looked putrid. I mean, we are going to have to take some chances on big favorites this week. And I think Atlanta at home against a team where Jay Cutler looks disinterested, doesn't look like he can do anything worth a damn. Devontae Parker might be banged up. We also know that Jarvis Landry is just an underneath guy. He's not a guy that can take the top off a defense. How much do they really feel comfortable in throwing to Kenny Stills? Because you've seen the targets that Devontae Parker has been getting. And then on the Atlanta side of the ball, Julio Jones had the week to get healthy, and that is what they needed very badly. You need a healthy Julio Jones here. Plus, man, listen, they at home, this is just a different team. They're able to run very well. They're able to pass very well. They're able to do just about anything that they want. The big thing here for me is not necessarily the 12.5, the 12s, and the 11.5s that we're looking at whenever you look across the various books here on SBR odds. It's that number of 46 that you can still get in several places. Joe, my question to you is this. Where are the 46 points going to come from? I mean, is Miami going to, what do we consider them good for in this game? 10? If that's the case, do we think Atlanta scores 35? If that's the case, it's still going under in this game. I'm just wondering where the points are going to come from if they don't come from Atlanta. Can they score 46 on their own? Maybe, but I don't see that happening.
First play here is a 6-point teaser that takes the Saints from 6 to pick 'em and the Falcons from 12 to 6, because I think Atlanta is going to put it on Miami in this game for 2 reasons. Number one, the last time Atlanta was playing football, they were getting train wrecked by the Buffalo Bills before their bye week. They looked awful in that football game, absolutely dreadful. And that was a soul-searching moment that you have to recognize and process for 2 weeks worth of time. On the flip side, Adam Gase, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, did you see his press conference when he had to talk about his offensive line coach resigning for using cocaine in the office? Dude looked like he was ready to pack it in on the season. He looks like he's completely lost control. Well, you talked about Jay Cutler. He's halfway retired as is. This team's a mess.
His quarterback threw for 92 yards last week. That might be another reason why he felt so down and out as well.
And then his friend is doing cocaine and filming it in the office. It's been a rough week.
Again, Dave, it was out of love. Okay. He was making a video love card, basically. It was like a love letter, a video love letter.
Who would have thought that at the beginning of the season, Miami going into a game with Atlanta would be bigger dogs than the Jets going into a game with the New England Patriots? But that's exactly what we have here. 10.5 points is what they were laying it open, and that's come down in some places. 9.5 9 for the New England Patriots. Total in this one is 47 at open, and now it's 47.5. Joe, you start on this one. Do the Patriots go into New Jersey and smash here, or is this one of these spots where it turns into these weird close games that really shouldn't have been close on paper starting week 1?
No, give me the Jets. I'll definitely take the Jets. The Patriots are 0-4 against the spread last 4 trips to New York, and the underdog fares well in this series. 6-1-1 against the spread the last 8 times they've gotten together. What you'll hear about New England is that, they've had 10 days to get ready for this game coming off the Thursday nighter in Tampa. They still didn't look very good in Tampa. Tampa just looked that much worse that New England's no longer the story for playing so bad. But this Jets team's cooking. They're not exactly beating great opposition. They needed to grind it out for a little while against the Jets, and they've had some other games this year that aren't exactly against the cream of the crop, but they're a cohesive unit, and they play hard. If you watch the Jets on the field, they fly to the football. Sure, talent's going to be an issue throughout the course of the season, but they care. Right now, they care, and this is their biggest rival, and they're on top of the division. So they're coming into this game believing they can win it. You're going to give me that many points at home against that type of New England defense? I'm going to look to the over a little bit because Brady's going to do Brady, and I'm going to look to the Jets with all the points, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's hard for me to play a side here. I mean, I guess if you like the side,
play the Jets.
If you like the Jets, then you're definitely heading over to 5 dimes where you can get it at 11. I mean, it seems like everyone else has moved to 10, 9, 9.5 or something like that. So you're definitely heading to 5 dimes. I, like you, if there is a play for me in this game, I'm looking more towards the over, because as we have found in this game, I mean, for this team with New England, boy, they can't stop anybody. I mean, Jameis Winston was having an incredibly terrible game. I mean, terrible. And still got to over 300 yards. I mean, still was able to throw over 300 yards despite just missing guys left and right against this New England team. And we know what Tom Brady's doing. He's basically on pace to have the greatest season a quarterback has ever had. I don't think the Jets stop that from happening either. 47.5. Joe, I know you like these 6-point teasers. Now, you could talk me into Jets plus 17 over 41.5. Now, that could be certainly something that you could talk me into.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that's not a bad idea. The Jets are going to give them all they can handle here. Not saying they're going to win, but New England's not just going to roll into New York and kick the crap out of the Jets. What's made any of us think that New England's that type of football team this year? Brady in the offense? Check. But defensively, we saw what happened at home against Carolina. We saw what happened against the Kansas City Chiefs. You needed to gut one out against Tampa Bay. Your only credible win is that game that took place in New Orleans when you smashed the Saints, and the Saints played like garbage in that game.
Let's go ahead and take 10 seconds to tip our cap to Josh McCown, because this guy has this team with a winning record with just absolute garbage around him. I mean, they gave this guy absolutely nothing, and he has been able to turn all of that trash into some pretty decent, play on the field. I mean, listen, this Jets team is not horrible to watch. Like, you don't cringe when you're watching them play.
Well, what about this? Chicago, this is the lowest total on the board for the week. Opens at 39.5 and remains flat there. Chicago is traveling on the short week to Baltimore. Baltimore goes into Oakland last week and surprises them. In the first 8 seconds of the game, it's 14-0. And then they maintain that lead and they win that game outright in a game that we all thought that Oakland was going to be able to beat up on Baltimore. I mean, it was one of those spots where you think Joe Flacco has been miserable. They've had all sorts of problems this season. And then all of a sudden they show a little bit of life. Now they open at 6.5 points. They open at 6.5, and it's gone up in a couple places to 7.
Flacco didn't even have to do anything in that game. The Raiders could not stop the run whatsoever, and that was the demise of them in that game, along with a couple of questionable coaching decisions, which we won't go on a rant on. But, Del Rio made some bonehead decisions in that game.
He's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I have no confidence whatsoever in either side here. Joe, if anything, I did see some signs of life out of the Chicago offense when Mitchell Trubisky was under it. Yeah, he made a rookie throw in crunch time. Sure, that's going to happen here. But this guy looks like he's got what it takes to be successful in this league. This Ravens team, certainly not world beaters. My only problem here is that 6.5 number. If I was getting 7 in a hook, this seems like a lock for me on Chicago's side. I could see Baltimore getting, winning an extremely ugly game by a touchdown. And that's why when I was looking over the plays for the week this week, guys, this was one of the first games that I wrote down and put a line through. I don't see any advantage whatsoever in either side of this game.
can't play the Bears on the road. They've only covered twice in their last 10 road games. And we've seen them this year get annihilated away from Soldier Field. Plus, you got a rookie quarterback on a short week going up against a non-conference opponent in the Baltimore Ravens in this spot. There's nothing to like about Trubisky and the Bears here. What you can probably glob onto is the fact that the Bear offense isn't going to score a whole lot of points. So you got a total sitting around 39.5, depending on where you shop. What are you going to get out of the Baltimore Ravens? Well, they just chewed up Oakland, but Oakland's got an absolutely dreadful defense, and all those points weren't even courtesy of Joe Flacco and the offense. You did have the Jimmy Smith fumble return from 44 yards out about 4 minutes into the game when Jared Cook fumbled that pass from E.J. Manuel. The Raiders made the Ravens look a hell of a lot better than the Ravens actually are. This game has like 17-13, 17-10 written all over it. I'll play under 39 total points. I can't get behind Flacco in this offense against the Bear D covering close to a touchdown, and I can't back Trubisky and John Fox on the road in this situation. So I'll play under 39.5 here.
This one I feel more confident about than the last time we said this. If you're not a Bears fan or a Ravens fan, do not watch this game. Just turn it off. Find something else on the television. Last time we told you not to watch a game, it ended up having like 1,500 yards of offense and 700 points. But I am fairly confident that this game is not going to turn into that.
So San Francisco hasn't figured out how to get a win yet this season. They're going up against Washington. This is our last early game of the day. Opens at 46.5, has gone up in a couple of places to 47. Washington opens laying 9, and since has jumped up to 10.5, 11.5 in some places. Again, to see all these different sports books, go to sportsbookreview.com, sbrodds.com, and you'll be able to see these lines changing in real time. Matt, you start us out on this one. Washington, do you trust them laying 10.5, 11?
Here's the thing. I don't like the side here, but I love the total and I love the over. There's one thing about the San Francisco offense. When they face mediocre to bad defenses, and we talked about this last week on the show, they're actually showing out pretty well. Hoyer is being able to find his receivers, and they've actually moved the ball. They've just not been able to squeak one of these games out. Probably the best 0-5 team of all time, maybe. Like, I mean, these guys are in every game. They just can't seem to get it done. Washington's going to put up points here. I mean, like that's just the case. I mean, the Colts were able to put up points on San Francisco. Washington's definitely going to be able to do it. Coming off of a bye, looks like Jordan Reed is going to be back. Looks like Jamison Crowder is finally going to be 100% healthy for this team as well. So Kirk Cousins is going to have a full arsenal to throw to. Doesn't look like Rob Kelly's going to play, but that's fine. They've got other backs there in Thompson and P. Ryan that they can look to as far as rushing the ball. I think that over here, especially where at the places, looks like there's a couple of different places you can get it at 46.5. I think it's very easily possible that Washington goes for 31 points in this game, and then you're really only looking for a handful of points from San Francisco, Joe. I think San Francisco is going to be able to score, and I think Washington's going to be able to score a lot.
What you have here is a situation where you've got the Kirk Cousins Bowl in full effect. This is the Redskins who are possibly going to re-sign Kirk Cousins. It might cost them $30+ million. And then you got the San Francisco 49ers and head coach Kyle Shanahan who want to be able to sign Kirk Cousins come the offseason. So this is a big game for both teams. Shanahan's familiar with Cousins' game, so maybe deep down he might know one or two weaknesses that the defense can play into. And for the 49ers, very good news. Rookie linebacker Reuben Foster was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. He was flying around the field. Looks like he's going to get the start for the Niners this weekend. That's big for the defense. But speaking of the defense, after that disaster of a game in week 1 against Carolina, you played 4 straight competitive games. The first 3 of which you covered. Last week at Indy, you didn't because it was a tight spread, but you still went deep into overtime. How many snaps has this defense played the last 2 weeks, right? You're going to go to overtime, and we're talking late in overtime at Arizona, late in overtime at Indianapolis. Now you're back out on the road again, late against Washington. You've got to deal with the 3-hour time difference. Washington's coming off the bye. This is a big spread. And I like what the Niners have done this season, but they are out of gas. So what I'm going to hope for is this: a relatively close game through the first 30 minutes. And then in the second half, I'm going to unload on the Washington Redskins because they're going to put their foot down on the San Francisco Necks collectively. Other than that, I would look to the Redskins in this game because I don't think San Francisco is going to have nearly enough gas to compete for 60 minutes.
So this next game, Tampa Bay and Arizona, is an interesting one. Opens as a pick'em, total 43.5. And since then, well, the news of Adrian Peterson coming to town certainly didn't help Arizona by any stretch of the imagination. Tampa Bay has actually become a 2-point favorite, so they're laying 2 almost across the board, 1.5 in a couple of places. If you look at SBRodds.com, you can see those updated in real time. But Matt, you start us out on this one. Tampa Bay, Arizona, do you trust either of these teams?
Boy, this might be the ugliest good game on the slate this week. I mean, this game has a chance to be fun, but just has ugly written all over it. What the hell is going on with this Arizona team? I mean, they are not scoring any points. They are just not getting the ball in the end zone, despite the fact that Carson Palmer actually has all of his weapons, at least pass-catching weapons. Obviously, missing David Johnson is massive for him. But, boy, this team, to me, is absolutely nuts. My first thought when this came out, to me, I know the line has moved in the opposite direction, but a couple of different times I've taken stands against Vegas and where the odds and where the lines are moving. I don't see a lot of points in this game. I mean, I look at Arizona really, really struggling. They have failed to meet their implied total in the last 4 games that they played. And so to me, with a pretty decent defense here, Patrick Peterson is going to lock down Mike Evans. So can Jameis Winston and Deshaun Jackson get it done? Can Jameis Winston and Cameron Brate get it done? For me, maybe the way to go about this is to use Doug Martin very heavily. And if that's the case, that's an even bigger reason for me to look towards the under here. For me, this was one of the first plays that I looked at as far as the unders this week.
Agreed. That's where I'm leaning. The Arizona offense has no pop whatsoever. No pop, no sizzle. They're excited that they just traded for Adrian Peterson, who fits them to a T. Why? Because he's old and he's broken down like the rest of that team and coaching staff.
And averaging under 3 yards a carry. So, yeah,
he's not going to do anything. They're going to give him 15 to 20 carries a game, and he's going to average 3 yards per carry, and everyone's going to be pissed off. Palmer doesn't have any protection. But here's another kicker to this thing. Tampa Bay's got 10 days to get ready, but what is Tampa Bay? What is Tampa Bay? They had a win over the Giants, but the Giants are clearly terrible. And last week against New England, that is dreadful. The worst defense in the league. You couldn't muster any sort of offensive explosion whatsoever. I don't know what to make of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're overrated, quite frankly, and that's a big miss on me from early in the season. So I'd go with Matt. I'd go under the total here. I don't think you're going to have a whole lot of sizzle in this game.
And like we said, I mean, the one thing that has been consistent about either one of these teams is Patrick Peterson. He has shut down the other team's number one wide receiver 5 out of 5 times this year. Happened again last week with Alshon Jeffrey. So for me, if it's Mike Evans getting taken out of the equation here and Tampa Bay has to rely on either their tight end and Cameron Brate or Deshaun Jackson, seems to me like a pretty good under.
Well, then this next game, you talk about confusing games and not really knowing what to make of these teams. The LA Rams, last week before the game with Seattle looked like the hottest team in the NFC West. And offensively, they've got all these weapons and they're starting to look really good. And now they're going into a game with Jacksonville the following week where they open at a pick'em and then the line moves to Jacksonville actually being favored by 2.5 to 3 points.
Dave, I'm guessing I got vetoed last week when I said we're skipping all Jacksonville games going forward. I guess.
Well, look.
I got vetoed.
Yeah, because the Chargers and Oakland is off the board, we have to fill in the content.
Okay.
So that's what's going on. Yeah,
we would
it's a filler episode.
Yeah. We would love for Dave to be able to just intro this game and then it just skips to him talking about the next game. Yeah, it just like a big X goes. Yeah, an X goes across the screen and then he just is talking about the next game here. But I mean, you want to talk about a team?
Half is open. It's come down to 42.5 in some places. 43 still in other spots, and 42 is what I'm seeing over on Heritage right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you want to talk about a team that is the hardest team to peg, quite possibly through 5 weeks that I've ever seen in NFL history, and that would be this Jacksonville Jaguars team. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ben Roethlisberger handed them that game last week through 5 horrible. Actually, I can't blame this all on Ben Roethlisberger. The coaching staff in Pittsburgh handed them this win last week because they chose to run the ball 15 times with Le'Veon Bell, despite the fact that Jacksonville's rush defense is actually one of the worst in the league. They decided to throw against their pass defense 55 times, I might add, which is the best in the league. So, I mean, listen, that game was handed to them. I saw this game, Joe. I chuckled because you and I go back and forth about this Jacksonville Jaguars team. I chuckled, and I actually said, wouldn't surprise me to see Jacksonville put it on the Rams right here at home. The Rams coming across the country after kind of laying an egg there in a game that against Seattle that they should have won. And all, I mean, Seattle tried to hand them that game. They just refused to take it. Another team that had a bad game plan. I can see Jacksonville on the legs of Leonard Fournette and the 57 yards that Blake Bortles might throw for here and a defensive score win this game by 2 touchdowns. Is that crazy for me to say?
No, but I'd say this. We make jokes every week about how it's the most unpredictable team to try and handicap in the NFL. I think you could make the case that they're the most predictable team in the NFL to try and handicap. We're 5 weeks in. They win, they lose, they win, they lose, they win. They're due for a loss. And watch the line movement. If you're on SBRodds.com, watch the line movement. The second this game got to 3 at virtually every major book, there was immediate buyback on the Rams to take it to 2.5. That's a big sign to me. That means take the 3 because you might not be able to get it. And at Just Bet right now, as well as at Bookmaker, which are both there on SBR Odds, there are 3s available. Give me the Rams plus the 3. People who don't pay attention look at the Rams and say, yeah, they are who we thought they are. They played a good team in Seattle and they lost. Bullcrap. They played that game horribly. They made a ton of mistakes in the red zone. Cooper Kupp dropped a potential touchdown at the end of the game that could have set that team up for the win. They had it. They had Seattle on the ropes, and if you go into the box score or you watch the tape, you'll realize they could have won that game. They blew it. Work the kinks out, hit the road. Give me the 3 against Jacksonville because the one thing I know about the Jaguars, they don't have a quarterback who can throw the ball up and down the field with any sort of consistency.
If you believe in this Rams coaching staff, you would like to believe that they went and they watched the tape and realized the error of their ways. The way to beat Seattle, and we talked about it last week, and they didn't do it, is to run the ball. Todd Gurley only had 14 carries. They put it on the arm of their second-year quarterback, and that's just the wrong strategy against Seattle. So you'd like to think they go back, figure out the error of their ways, realize that you don't beat Jacksonville through the air and you do it on the ground. That being said, they didn't do it against Seattle, so I don't know. It's hard for me to say that they're going to do it against Jacksonville.
All right, next up is the Chargers in Oakland, and this game is off the board because they don't know whether or not Derek Carr is going to go just yet. Anything that you guys want to add to this game before we move on?
He's going to play. He could have played last week. The team held him out. He's going to play. I'm here on the flagship station. I follow this every day of the week. He took the media interview for the starting quarterback this week. Last week, that was E.J. Manuel who went up to the podium. Carr's going to go because it's desperation time for the Raiders. The question is Todd Downing, the offensive coordinator, going to take the shackles off this offense and start throwing the ball around the field? They don't take shots down the field. They can't get the ball to Amari Cooper. The offensive line isn't protecting as they had hoped, and the cornerback situation is an absolute mess. Meanwhile, here comes Phillip Rivers in a division rivalry game who's going to walk right up to the line of scrimmage. He's going to find Sean Smith, and he's going to throw at him all day long. I would see the Raiders coming out around a 3-point favorite, maybe higher. Give me the points with the Chargers when that eventually happens, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and it's all going to come down to whether the Raiders can stop the run or not. I mean, we saw the Chargers last week rely extremely heavily on Melvin Gordon, and I imagine they will do that again this week. They saw that the Raiders were not able to stop a far inferior rushing attack from Baltimore last week. The Chargers rushing attack with Melvin Gordon is much better. They utilize him much better as well. I think this is all going to come down to right there at the offensive and defensive line. Who wins that battle in the run game? Joe, listen, you feel confident in that. I mean, you gotta tell me, is Oakland going to be able to shut down Melvin Gordon? Because that's going to be the difference in this game.
Defense hasn't shut down anything. Smart coaching, and I'm not saying the Chargers have it, but smart coaching happened last week in the Baltimore game. The Ravens said to themselves, who can hurt us the worst on the Raider defense? And everyone raised their hand and said the same thing. Khalil Mack. He's the only guy who can make plays. So they neutralized him. He didn't record a single pressure, and the rest of the defense couldn't do a damn thing for 4 quarters. You're going to see more of the same this week. That secondary is terrible. Phillip Rivers is going to make them pay. I'm hoping it comes out Raiders minus 3.5 or greater. I'll be on the Chargers in this one.
I'll tell you this. Phillip Rivers gets Mike Williams back, it looks like, this week as well. So an embarrassment of riches for him to use against this Oakland team.
Pittsburgh, coming off that very disappointing loss to Jacksonville that we were just talking about, now has to travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, who are number one, almost consensus in everyone's power rankings. Kansas City laying 3.5 at open. Now it's jumped up to 4, 4.5, even 5 in some places is what I'm seeing currently on SBRodds.com. 47 is a total here. Matt, what do you got?
This Pittsburgh team, man, holy mackerel. This is just absolutely so frustrating to watch how this is playing out with this team. You certainly hate to hear as a fan of, me as a fan of a team that I said was going to win the Super Bowl this year, that their quarterback is coming out and saying, maybe I don't have it anymore. Maybe I'm not good.
You're like, hey, Ben, it's like week 5. Maybe just go ahead and pump the brakes on that until week 14 or something.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, Dave, and this is just a small aside here. We are only 5 weeks into the season. That is like the smallest sample size like ever. I mean, for us to think that we've got this all figured out, we don't have it all figured out just yet. I mean, things are still coming into their own. Teams still have time to get things figured out right here. It's not just absolute doom and gloom unless you're some of these 0-5, 1-4 teams. Pittsburgh, you would like to think, watched this game against Houston with Kansas City and saw that this Kansas City team can be passed on. I mean, like they definitely can be passed on. Marcus Peters, I think, gets talked up a little bit more than his actions on the field actually show. I don't think he's a lockdown corner by any stretch of the imagination in this league. And if that's the case, Antonio Brown's going to win that battle. We've seen Juju Smith-Schuster actually pretty much take over Martavis Bryant. He's been outplaying him there. I think he is a very, very good weapon for Ben Roethlisberger. And, of course, Le'Veon Bell came out after the game and said, I don't know why they quit using me. And we've seen whenever these guys come out and they do the whole squeaky wheel thing, they finally get the ball the way that they should get it. Give me Pittsburgh and the 5 points here, even in Kansas City. I think the Steelers right the ship.
Pittsburgh's team is filled with complainers. That's what they do every week. One week, Antonio Brown complains he's not used enough. The next day, Ben Roethlisberger complains about Antonio Brown's complaints. And then the next day, it's Le'Veon Bell complaining about his usage in the offense. Newsflash, Mike Tomlin doesn't have this team buttoned up. In the locker room, they couldn't even figure out how to handle their national anthem protest. Like, seriously, they couldn't figure out if they were coming out or staying in the locker room, and then the Bears stomped them at Soldier Field. The Steelers are a shell of what we think they are, and they've got a quarterback who's already halfway out the door. He's had enough with the roster. He's complained about the coach repeatedly, and the last spot you want to be in when your head ain't right is Arrowhead Stadium against the most dialed-in team in the National Football League. 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread. The game against Houston, yeah, Houston gave it to him a little bit offensively from their perspective on Kansas City's D because Kansas City was on the short week and they ran out of gas late in that game, but they still found a way to win. They're going to come back here and they're going to hammer Pittsburgh because you've got a guy in Mike Tomlin who's a nice motivator. That's what he is. He's a motivator. He motivates you, but he'll never out-scheme anybody, as evidenced by what we see against the Patriots every time those two meet. Against Andy Reid, you could say the same thing about Andy in the past, but this year, Andy's been dialing up his offense like never before. Alex Smith, has to be your front runner for the MVP award. I'll take the Chiefs. I'll lay the points. I don't think Pittsburgh has a whole lot in this game.
I guess we can see what won't be a contest pick for us this week. We are on completely different sides of that one.
All right, so I think this one should be a consensus, right? The dreadful New York Giants are traveling to Mile High Stadium to be challenged by that defense of the Denver Broncos, and 40.5 is what it opens at, and it actually drops back to 38.5, 39, 39.5, depending on where you look. And Denver started laying 9, now they're laying 11.5, 13 in some places. I think that's maybe just too many points, but this should be a bloodbath, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, give me Denver's going to cover this spread. They are going to cover the spread against this Giants team. This Giants team, if I were them, I would be going into full tank mode at this point. There's absolutely nothing to play for. You're not going to make the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. You lost your best three receivers in the game.
Only 3 receivers? Yeah.
You lost your best 3 receivers in the same game. I mean,
at least you can run the ball, though.
Yeah.
You can't.
Actually,
yeah,
can't. Yeah.
Your starting running back and your backup running back, who, by the way, is Orleans Darkwa, got nicked up. And so, I mean, like, listen, we are going to be watching this game going, who caught that ball? Like, what is going on here?
Is that Ocho Cinco? Did they call him up?
Actually, I just lied. We're going to say, who was that targeted to? Because they're not going to be catching any balls. There's going to be zero chance that they throw the ball here in the no-fly zone in Denver against this Broncos team. Broncos are going to cover 12. This is a contest pick, my friends. The Broncos are going to cover 12. This game is going to get ugly. The Giants have nothing to play for. They know it. They know it too. They need to go and draft their next quarterback. They need to draft their next franchise player. This season is over for this team.
You're 0-5 playing at altitude on Sunday night against a hungry Denver team that's very much going to get things this season. I'd look at the New York Giants, team total, which implied here is probably about 13 points, and I'd go under. I don't see the Giants scoring more than 10 points in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to move the football. Agree with everything Matt said, and that's all I wanted to add on top.
All right, and the final one here is our Monday night game, and it's off the board currently because we don't really know what's going on in Tennessee yet at the quarterback position. Indianapolis, Tennessee, on paper, pretty ugly game. At what point does this become attractive to you? Because again, it's not on the board right now. So, Joe, where does this number need to be as far as the total goes and the spread to go? You know what? This is something I'm interested in, if at all.
Jacoby Brissett's a gamer. He's been a gamer the first 2 weeks. He's been under center. The last 2 weeks where he's actually had some true practice reps to get ready, he gamed out in the Seattle game. I feel like I'm using the word game quite a bit in this analysis.
It's a lot
of, he also played well in the match against the San Francisco 49ers this past weekend. This kid's going to be a starter in the NFL somewhere next year. Someone's going to have to give him a shot because the Colts are going to bring back Andrew Luck. Now, it's a Monday night game in Tennessee, and there's a massive, massive drop-off between Marcus Mariota, who's not being utilized properly, and Matt Castle, who shouldn't even be playing in a rec 7-on-7 flag football league. So I'm not sure if there's anything on the side I would like. If Castle plays and you've got a pick-em situation, I'd probably look to the Colts on the road here because Castle will give them 7 points, maybe even 2 scores worth of turnovers. For a total perspective, I might lean a little bit to the over no matter who's at quarterback because I think there will be enough of a mess to set up opposing offenses in the short field, Matt.
Who is better, Jacoby Brissett or Jay Cutler? In my opinion, Jacoby Brissett. Jay Cutler was able to beat this.
Terrible question.
Jay Cutler was able to beat this team last week with Matt Castle under center. If Matt Castle is under center again, we are absolutely taking the Colts in this game. I mean, I think I would take the Colts even as a small favorite if that even came out. If it was a point and a half, something like that, 2 points, I think I would still take them even in that scenario, Joe. This, to me, seems like a smash situation for the Colts with Matt Castle under center. If you watched that game, it was painful to watch him play the quarterback position. It was like watching Sam Bradford in the first half of that Vikings game. No mobility, nothing left with the arm, couldn't do anything, just missing everybody left and right. This team is horrible with Matt Castle under center. And listen, these hamstring injuries especially with a guy like Mariota could flame up at any time as well. So even if they try to get him to go, he could very well come in for a quarter and come back out of that game because that hamstring injury bothers him yet again. So for me, again, we don't have a line, we don't have a total, but I feel like I'm going to be on the Colts side in this one.
Matt, Dave, he's basically sitting there like, I don't even need a spread, Las Vegas. I'm going to win money on this game.
Basically.
Right. If you go to SBRodds.com, of course, it's not just NFL. You can also bet Major League Baseball, and you can bet NHL and NBA, which, of course, is coming up. But let's quickly talk about college. Any games that are piquing either of your guys' interest for this weekend in college ball?
Oh, yeah. The Red River Shootout. Oklahoma is an 8-point favorite against the Texas Longhorns in the Red River Shootout. Now, most people are going to look at this game, and they're going to say Oklahoma just got rocked at home by Iowa State. Huge upset, has ruined the season. They're going to come back angry. It's pretty decent analysis. But they got to cover 8 against Texas and Tom Herman. Let me tell you something about Tom Herman. You want to be on his side when he's in the underdog role. First-year head coach at Texas this season. He was only an underdog once so far this year. That was the game at USC where they took the Trojans to overtime. Didn't win, but they covered. Okay? So let's go back to 2012 when Tom Herman started as an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. He was there for about 3 years. Then he was the head coach at Houston for 2 years. Then he came to Texas. In that scenario, 2012 until now, Herman has found himself as an underdog on 11 occasions. He has covered the spread in all 11 spots. And not only that, he's won outright in 10 of 11. The only time Tom Herman did not pull an upset as an underdog was that game against USC this season. At Houston, he upset Louisville and Lamar Jackson 2 years in a row. Bowl game against Florida State as a big dog, beat them outright. Ohio State as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. He took Cardale Jones past Alabama and whoever they rolled in the game before that in the semifinal. It was Oregon and Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. He was big dogs in both situations. This guy thrives in the underdog role. Give me Tom Herman and the Texas Longhorns plus the points. I think they might win that game outright.
All right,
I'll tell you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you this, Dave. There's going to be a battle of the Tigers in Baton Rouge. Auburn is going to stomp LSU. They are
Steve,
going
doesn't
to.
it feel good to hear this?
They are going to absolutely.
Matt's LSU alum, so
Listen,
to hear him say that LSU is going to get just bloodbath with the Tigers from Auburn, I love that. Yeah.
Listen. LSU a 7 point dog in Baton Rouge, 7.5 in some places, dog in Baton Rouge. Meaning these bookmakers probably give them more than the 3 points for being at home. They probably want to make these guys like 12, 13 point dogs, and they just can't do it. Listen, LSU is not good. Do not let this horrible win against Florida fool you. They're a horrible team. Auburn is going to roll against LSU.
All right. And last but not least, for those of you that are tuning in early to this, thank you for that, by the way. A Thursday night game that actually on paper looks like a really good game. 44.5 is the total here. Philadelphia is traveling to Carolina. Carolina laying 3 at open, 3.5 pretty much across the board right now. Matt, you start on this one. How do you see this game going?
Well, first, I would like to start out by apologizing to Cam Newton and the entire Carolina Panthers team.
Sorry, that's from all of us.
For me basically saying that you were washed up after 2 weeks into the season, and all you did was go out and have amazing games over the last 2 weeks. I mean, Cam Newton, some of those throws he was making, just dimes. I mean, just perfect.
Right, so his shoulder looked hurt. Everyone's going, oh, is Cam Newton done? He doesn't look like the same Cam Newton. He can't run the ball anymore. His accuracy is off. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, never mind. I was wrong.
Yeah. Oops. And listen, it wasn't for it wasn't for any yardage, but like he did have 7 rushing attempts last week. So, I mean, they're kind of getting him back into being Cam Newton again. And if that's the case, there's no reason this team can't overachieve. I mean, or at least achieve to the level that we thought that they were going to be here. I think this was a rough spot for Philly, to be honest with you, Joe. You and I both are very high on Carson Wentz, but this Carolina defense is legit. They are absolutely for real. Being at home here, going on the road against a Carolina team that's starting to roll with Cam Newton. 3.5. If you can get the 3, and there's only 1 left on the board, I don't like the hook being thrown on top there. If you can get the 3 with Carolina, certainly like that. I think worst case scenario, you're pushing.
And right now on Bovada and Heritage, as we're sitting live, that's where it sits as 3. So yeah.
Maybe you buy the half a point if you think they win by field goal there or something like that. But I think this is a bad spot for Philly. I love this team long term. I just think this is going to be a rough go for this Eagles team.
Good Thursday night game. 2 good teams. This deserves Sunday night or Monday night treatment so both can be healthy and fully prepared. This shouldn't be on Thursday night where someone's going to get wasted as a result. I can't take Philadelphia in the spot. I don't love Carolina, but I'll say this. Playing Thursday night games in general, going back to week 2 from last season, because we're not going to look at week 1. It's the opening game of the year. You're not off the short week. Home teams, 14-7 against the spread. Favorites, 13-8 against the spread. The under hitting at about 62% as well since week 2 on Thursday night last year, and that includes this season. However, in the last 9 Thursday night encounters, this year, going back to last season, home team 8-1 against the spread, the under 6-3. So maybe if you want a little coin on this game, I'd lean to laying 3, which you can find, like Dave said, at Bovada and Heritage, courtesy of SBRodds.com. I would lean to laying the 3. I'd also maybe lean to the under, but they're not plays I love.
All right, and one final thing here. It is our NFL plays of the week for week number 5. Joe, you're first on this one.
Give me the Rams +3 at Jacksonville. We know the Jags. They win, they lose, they win, they lose, they win. They cannot string it together. They cannot enjoy success for more than 6 days at a time. I'll take the Rams, who should have won the game against Seattle last week. They're being a bit undervalued because of that defeat. That was a mistake by Cooper Kupp dropping the ball late in that game, a couple costly red zone turnovers. I'll take the Rams +3, which is still available out there, in Jacksonville against the Jags, Matt.
All right, Matt, you mentioned it earlier. You said that the Giants have nothing to play for. And look, Ben McAdoo's job may be on the line, but that doesn't matter. That team is dreadful. They are plagued by injuries at this point. They have absolutely no way to win this game against a very game Denver team. They're going to Mile High. It's on Sunday night. Everyone's going to be watching this game. I think it is a massacre for the Giants, even though this has since jumped up to 13 in some places is what Denver is laying. I'll still take Denver all day in that one. Giants should get smashed.
Yeah, I like the Saints here at home. Coming off of a bye, you can still get 4.5s out there. Listen, it's at 6. Actually, you can get a 4. Actually, at just bet right now. It's all the way up to 6 in other places. This money's coming in on New Orleans. They're coming off of a bye. They get Willie Snead back, and honestly, they have a shred of life now. I mean, they have some hope. They thought this season might be totally out the window after the first couple of weeks, and here they sit and know they understand if they go on a little bit of a run, they could be a wild card team here, and the division is not completely locked up for Carolina at this point. I think this New Orleans team comes out on that fast track, really puts it on them coming out of this bye. Love the Saints here.
Go check out the best sportsbook page. Check out the ratings for these sportsbooks. And like we talked about at the top of the show, shop for the lines that you want. There's one place to do it that we recommend. That's sbrodds.com. Go there and see it all as it unfolds live. The lines will change in real time. Alongside Joe Fortenbaugh and Matt Brown, my name's Dave Farah. Thank you very much for listening and watching the Play Action Podcast.